I mean, and that's not to mention that if someone is saying that they're going to try to be like, say, Dwayne Johnson, the world's strongest men, an Olympic athlete or something, and then they think that, okay, all I have to do is do exactly what that person is doing at this moment, right? Putting in this many calories, this many grams of protein, this many hours at the gym. They think that's going to have them achieve the same status of whatever that person has achieved. That's not realistic, right there. I mean, that person didn't just suddenly jump into that kind of lifestyle. They didn't just, the world's strongest men didn't just become suddenly 300, 400 plus pounds and having most of that being muscle. They worked towards it.
Yeah.
We're talking about setting realistic goals here, and you are just starting out when it comes to, whether it comes to building your finances or building your physique or building your strength or whatever, your goal is. You have to understand where you're currently at and what is a realistic and healthy starting point. Right? Because there's only so much, just like there's only so much that your body can handle when regardless of whatever stage you're at. Even those people that we just mentioned have limitations, right? There's only so much that your body can handle of where you're currently at, and the same goes for your financial status. There's only so much that you can currently do with the amount of money that you have.
Yeah. And as you'll notice here really soon, especially as we're getting into the really deep stuff, we've kind of been referred to as the light and the dark side of the force.
MisterMarketing.
I have the high ground. You underestimate my
Corporate experience.
Don't try it.
Mr. Billson over here will have a much lighter perspective. I will have the opposite. Unfortunately, in America especially, we've kind of just devolved into the get rich quick scheme. Like, oh, I'm going to go ahead and invest in crypto, and then 6 months later, I'm going to have $1 million. Or like you just got done saying that I'm just going to go ahead and start lifting weights, get big muscles, and look like Dwayne Johnson at the end of the year. And that's exactly how none of that shit works. That's how none of that shit works. Bleeding in a little bit into the social aspect is that there seems to be this really weird collective delusion going on that if you don't have that Dwayne Johnson body by the end of the year, if you're not making Jeff Bezos money by the time you clear 40, then everyone else has just surpassed you and you're a loser. No, like in the area that I'm in, El Paso, Texas, the median income is $24,000 a year. $24,000 a year, and that's median. Like 50% are making more, 50% are making less. I definitely don't want it to come across that, like just lower your expectations, don't strive for big things. I'm saying that if you're going to strive for big things, that's cool, but make sure the math checks out, like just basic math. And I know that's scary to Americans. It's right on there with poltergeists and ex-murderers, but basic math, if your goal is to save $200 a month, because that's what you're working with, right? You're not going to make $1 million in 18 months. That's just not how numbers work. I'm really curious about your perspective on just the collective American delusion that by 18 months, boom, millionaire, or by 18 months, Dwayne Johnson muscles, like that, just that collective delusion.
I mean, like you said, there's nothing wrong with reaching for the stars. It's just, do you have a feasible means of flying and getting to that point?
But Mr. Billson, if I just want it hard enough, no, dude, you need a rocket ship, you need a pressurized suit, like you need to get your shit together. NASA was working on this for years.
Yeah, wanting something is definitely a great starting point, and understanding what it is that you want is actually a very important thing that I stress to a lot of people that are suffering from various delusions, frankly, as you put it. And definitely coming to grips with what it is exactly that you want is something that I think a lot of people need to think about more so. and spend a lot more time thinking about, but it isn't going to get you to the point that you want to get to just by thinking about it. It actually takes action.
Yeah. So, we kind of addressed the individual portion, the social portion. That's what we're really getting into. We're going to kind of flip the script a little bit. I'm just going to barf my thoughts and then you can go with your take on it. But as far as marketing, because we were talking about in the beginning, if I buy all this expensive shit that people are going to think I'm of higher value, right? I'd take the complete opposite philosophy. Essentially, just take what you have and then represent that the best you possibly can. For the idea that, buying these superfluous things will make me more valuable, my main question is in the eyes of who? Because if it's in the eyes of, like I mentioned previously with PR, a collective of idiots that have no idea what it takes to get there, no idea what's feasible and what's not, do you really want to market yourself to someone with no comprehension of what it takes to get there, but ridiculous standards? Or do you want to market yourself to someone that's more feasible, that actually understands candidly the value of a dollar?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, that's another way of putting it. Like I was saying, just thinking about what exactly do you want, not thinking about what it is that you might have said, I need this, or I have to have this, or just phrasings or thoughts that are not actually getting down to the point, which is that what do I really want from this, right? I can say that, but I'm going to say I need to get a job, right? Well, I can say that, but technically I don't actually need to get a job, right? I want to get a job, right? If I'm in that position, that's what I'm saying, right? I want to get a job maybe because I want to sustain this type of lifestyle, right? I want to sustain this type of lifestyle, and it requires this amount of income base, right? And this amount of income is only going to start with me getting X job. So I don't need to get a job. I want to have this lifestyle. And so in order to have this lifestyle, I want to get a job so that I can make this amount of money. There's steps to it and different parts that I feel it's important to recognize before you just jump into what I need. Recognizing what it is you want that will lead up to that thing that you currently think that you need. And once you've broken that down, I think that it becomes a lot easier to recognize, is that feasible? Can I actually do that? Do I know the steps that will lead to that?
Yeah, so I mean, really just separating a need from a want. Figuring out, okay, a need is in order for this to happen, this has to happen. In order for getting two, you have to add one and one. That's a need, for things to progress. But a want is, I want the number two. I want $2,000 in my bank account. I want to this or whatever. That's a want. So there's a very realness between that mechanical need. This has to happen in order to get this versus I want this end result.
Yeah, exactly.
As far as, marketing, ironically enough, the statistics on marriage are pretty rough because they keep changing. But essentially what it boils down to is that roughly half of marriages in America, the number one primary reason is not because of infidelity or, incompatibility. That's not the number one reason. The number one reason is finances. That's why it falls apart. So a large portion of what we're doing here is, dating relationship advice, but we also, like on the last episode, touched on careers like OnlyFans being a viable career option. But as far as what your market is, say in the case of dating, is that, okay, so there may be a ton of people out there that need you to drive a really nice car and go in tons of debt to have these, expensive things. But is that your market? Do you want to end up with somebody that isn't going to stick around with you as soon as money starts getting tight? Or are you wanting to be with somebody that their perception of your value is what type of expensive shit you got and how new is it? So I wanted to get your idea on what your thought process was on actually getting to the right markets and advertising yourself to that instead of advertising yourself to someone that, say in the case of the marriage, could make you miserable because they have the wrong values.
Well, it's interesting that that you're saying that the number one cause for breakup, if I understand correctly, you're saying the number one cause for marriage divorce is finances in some manner or form. I think I look back at my parents and what led to their initial divorce. And mind you, both of them now are in a very happy relationship and have been in that relationship for quite a while. I'm trying to think of like what the difference might have been, and now that I'm really thinking about it, I mean, we did when we were children, when I was myself and my siblings were children, growing up, we didn't really have a lot as far as like financial ability, and yeah, like now that I'm really thinking about it, my parents did struggle a lot when it came to maintaining their finances and having a realistic look on both of their finances. And I remember them arguing a lot about that actually. And that's a huge factor in stress, really. Especially when you're talking about not just a marriage but a family. At that point you're maintaining multiple people's lives at that point, and a big portion of maintaining that is making sure that they've got a roof over their head and they have food on the table. And obviously, for an American lifestyle, at least, the majority of American lifestyles requires those things to have some sort of financial income to maintain them. As far as what people could really do to focus in on that market, on the market that they want to reach out to. I mean, I look again back at what my parents' current relationship is, and how, like I said, they're significantly different. I mean, I've met both of their new spouses, and they're in a great relationship. Frankly, they're in a very healthy relationship. Both of them. I think that it really did come down to that. Honestly, I think it came down to that sort of personal journey that they had to make before they met their current spouses. Because this is just my opinion on it, my take, but I do think that there's a lot of people who are so focused on other people, on another person or other people in general, and they're just not considering themselves very much. They're not considering their factor into the equation that is a relationship. It isn't just that other person, it is both people. That means you. To put it simply, I mean, if you are thinking about bringing someone else into your life, the first thing that I would recommend before you start thinking about that other person is the other portion of that, which is your life. What is your life? What are the factors of that? Where do I want that to be? What goals do I have for that portion of that equation? And once you've broken that down and really had a grip on that, then maybe start to think about introducing another factor into i.e. another person.
See, this is where it starts getting hot. You saw quite a few of the videos. The vast majority of them is, taking personal accountability, personal responsibility, kind of what you can affect in the situation. That's the part that's like always missing, man, because, you've done plenty of your own volunteer work as well, but like from the volunteer work that I've done, it's almost always the same story. How can I change my partner? How can I make my partner this way? How can I do that this way? And where things start getting real tight and people get real uncomfortable, it's okay, well, what have you been doing about you?
I mean, it's a scary thought, it's a scary thought to delve into our own psyche, to break down what we our subconscious is constantly aware of. I mean, it's constantly tracking what we're afraid of. To actually come to grips to it, let alone admit it, even maybe verbally state it to ourselves or another person, that's scary. It's much easier to just leave that in the back of our heads and in the subconscious and just focus on whatever's in front of us instead.
Yeah. So, I mean, as far as like self-focus, I think that really blends in nicely. But, kind of what we're talking about for advertising yourself to the right market, I'm going to phrase this in the way the dark side of the force would, is that if you have somebody that honestly believes that your value as a person or as a partner or whatever is based on essentially you having tons of expensive shit, where the value of that item is not matching the price tag, they're not the market you're to be advertising yourself to. Ironically, nobody wants to talk about life tips from a salesman, because salesmen are kind of like the lowest of the low in social stratums. But we still exist to this day, so really who won? But one of the things that I would honestly say, life experience from a sales perspective, is that not all your leads are going to buy. Most of your leads aren't going to buy. So that's something that I really have to say, that whether it's friends or relationships or a job or anything else, is qualify your leads. If you male, female, unicorn, I don't care how you identify, if the person you're interested in isn't going to be healthy and constructive for your life, congratulations, your lead disqualified themselves. Go away and find a lead that is qualified, someone that will be healthy in your life.
Well, and that's what I mean by really when it comes down to that thought of, well, I want to introduce X type of person into my life, right? You're not going to be in control of what somebody else does, no matter how hard you try. Okay, you can influence it maybe through your actions, right? But that's through your actions, your decisions from your will. That's what you have control over. Right? It's kind of difficult for a lot of people to remember that of what exactly they have control over. That is themselves. Lots of people really want to focus on that, what in my opinion is just an illogical goal of trying to control factors outside of yourself. It's illogical. It's completely unreasonable, and it's just not going to happen. At least from my experience, I've never met anyone who can control anyone else. When you have much more of a understanding and acceptance of your ability to control yourself and your desires and your actions, at least from my experience, when I've realized that about myself, I can say that I became a lot more successful in virtually everything that I set out to do from that point on, just because I was already in a more reasonable and accepting and forgiving mindset of myself and my capabilities and my failures and my successes and where I stood, where I was going. I was just much more reasonable with myself and simple.
Definitely. Another part of it from the, corporate shill side of things is knowing your market, right? So we have identified one that if, whoever it might be to you, essentially appraises your value by how expensive your shit is, then they just disqualify themselves. Congratulations, move on to someone that doesn't think like that. The other half of it is knowing your market. So now that we disqualified the people that see your value that way, go away, bye-bye.
Bye, Felicia.
The ones that don't see you that way, getting to actually know them. I don't know if you have the same perspective from your volunteer work, working with people kind of associated with the VA, but at least from what I've noticed is that most people have no clue what another person's like, mostly because they don't actually get to know them as a human being. They don't build that platonic intimacy, if you will. So if you can't understand who your real market is, you can't market yourself to them. Kind of curious on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I run into a lot. People that, once again, they have not spent that time thinking about themselves, thinking about their mindset at least, and delving into the parts of themselves that they're scared of. So because they haven't done that, they are in this unrealistic mindset for themselves. So they set that same unrealistic mindset as to how other people should be as well. That's really what it comes down to, I think.
So, I mean, at least kind of what we're talking about and what we're getting down to, it seems that, we can talk about other people, what your market is, qualifying your leads and stuff like that. But none of that really works until you work, until you actually kind of like delve in and do the work yourself. Kind of getting this down to the lowest common denominator, somebody that's just starting out in terms of like, self-improvement and how to view themselves accurately, things like that. How would you recommend they would even start?
One thing that I is a pretty simple. It's simple to start out to do. It definitely gets extremely difficult. I will give that forewarning once you really delve into it. But it is simple to start out to do, and that is just asking yourself the question of just thinking about what is one thing that I currently think that I can't do, that I'm not capable of doing. Something that you want to do, let's say, but you think that you can't do. Going into that, asking yourself, well, what if I did do that thing? Right? What if I did do that thing anyways, even though I think that I just can't do it? What would happen? What might be the consequences, right? What is it about those consequences that makes me believe that I can't do that thing? Is it because those consequences are or the actions to those consequences are actually outside of my physical capabilities? Or is it more so, and usually more often, are those actions outside of my desires? Am I saying that I can't do this thing because I actually mean that I don't want this consequence that I think might happen, and so I'm not going to do this thing? And the difference in that thought process is unbelievably critical when it comes to personal growth. Thinking about the idea of that I want something, or I say that I want something, but really I don't want it because I am capable of doing it, but I'm not doing it because I don't want this other thing to happen that I think might happen. That's a scary thought process. It's much easier to just say, well, I can't do that. I just can't. So I'm not going to. Easy thought process to go.
Yeah, and it goes along with the whole like not that much more evolved perspective. Like, if you have an chimpanzee, ape, if you pick, and they touch a hot stove, they're just gonna back away real quick. They're gonna go ahead and make some sounds to let its buddies know, hey, I'm in pain, and that's it. There's no thinking in any of this. There is just, I received a stimulus and then I do. Unfortunately, especially in modern day America, that's kind of how a lot of people live their lives. There's not a whole lot of thinking going on. There was just a stimulus, and then they reacted to said stimulus. So as far as a more structured approach to it is that, there's going to be pain involved. There's, pain involved in any type of growth. So there may be pain in introspection. There may be seeing things about yourself you don't want, or kind of waking up to the full reality of your situation that you don't want. But the question really boils down to, which one do you want more? Do you want to achieve whatever goal it is that you set yourself? Or do you just not want to have those uncomfortable feelings? But at a certain point, it all boils down to still you. We were talking about this not too long ago, but a lot of people make excuses, right? Like if I don't have what I want, it's society's fault, it's capitalism's fault, it's my family's fault, it's this or that other person's fault. And there are things, like you mentioned in the beginning of the conversation, that there's some things that just aren't your fault. There's things that happen to you and you have no control over it. And that's just the way it is. But what you do when it happen to you that is always within your realm of control. I kind of have the opinion that you really can't help someone that doesn't want to be helped. So if just their number one goal is to just not interface with the pain of self-reflection or, fully acknowledging their situation, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. They're not going to do it. Just let it go. But for those that are actually motivated enough to confront those uncomfortable feelings or shoulder those uncomfortable burdens, is there any encouragement you would give them to do the hard thing and reach their goals?
Just that basically, something that I personally had to go through myself. I had heard this quote before a while back. And when I first heard this quote, I just kind of looked at it as, well, that's a nice thing to say, but just, it doesn't really mean anything. It's just nonsense that somebody just said. The quote is that from Marianne Williamson, the author, that our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. When I actually realized what that quote was trying to get at, that it is so much easier to say you can't do something for me to say that I can't do something than for me to think about the amount of pain and endurance that it would take to go through to achieve the thing that I know I can do. I can do it. But thinking about all the pain that I would have to endure to get to it, it's so much easier for me to just say I can't. That's just what I'll do. At least that was my thought process before. And once I realized that was my thought process that whole time, once I realized that I really was just afraid of what I could do, not what I couldn't do, that changed me, honestly. That changed everything from that point forward.
Something to think about. Well, I think we covered pretty much everything. We covered evolution, we covered social strategies, we covered individual thinking, social thinking. We definitely spanned some topics. But really, Mr. Billson, thank you for tuning in. I think you gave some stuff to think about.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I hope I helped out some viewer out there. I know that there are a lot of people struggling in every aspect of their life. Or even just one small aspect of their life that's bringing them down to such an extent to where they feel like they can't move on. And so, yeah, I hope that I have somebody move past that.
Definitely. If you would kindly do the honors, I sign off every video with "Thanks for tuning in. This is Mr. Marketing. See you next time."
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in. This is Mr. Marketing. And I'll see you next time.